Shalom. Shalom. I am Rabbi Davidovich, speaking to you on behalf of the webyeshiva.org, speaking to you from Efrat, Israel. We are a little over a week before the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, which begins next Friday night. I want to talk today a little bit about this week's Parsha, which is Parsha Nitzavim, and talk about the connection of this Parsha Nitzavim with Rosh Hashanah, with COVID-19, the horrible pandemic that we're all going through in Israel and the rest of the world, and the command in this Parsha to choose life. From this Parsha, we can learn messages that affect us today. As I've said many, many times, we all know that the Torah is not a book of stories. Every letter in the Torah, every sentence, every parsha in the Torah has a message for us today as to how we should live our lives and how we can live our lives. Now, there's an interesting pasuk in this Torah that says as follows: Ha'edosi bochem hayom, I make known to you today. I will call witnesses to you for you today. Hashemayim es hashemayim es haaretz, the heavens and the earth that are eternal. Hachayim v'hamaves, life and death. Nosati lefanecha, I've given before you. Habracha v'haklala, the blessings and the curses. Then it says, Uvacharta b'chayim, you shall choose life. Laman tichya ata v'zaracha, in order that you and your children will be able to live. That's a strange commandment. Who in the world would not choose life? Who would choose death rather than life? Who would want death for their children, God forbid, instead of life? We know the Torah doesn't waste any words. So what is the Torah telling us? So looking at the Meforshim, there's some interesting comments. The Ibn Ezra, he says about you shall choose life. He says this means either beguf or bezecher, either in your actuality, in your body, in your material existence in this world, or in memory. People should remember you for a good life. But then he says, uperush, what this really means, ki hachayim heim le'ahava leman tichya, that life is love. Life is love in order that you shall live. You shall love in order that you shall live. And in fact, what he says is substantiated by the very next few words of the Torah. Choose life for you and your children, to love the Lord your God, and so on. The concept of love, of loving every human being, is a basic concept of the Torah. We're commanded, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That means that regardless of what your neighbor says, regardless of what your neighbor's opinions are, you have to love him because he's a human being, he's a child of God. Choosing life as we approach Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is, we're asking God for a new year for the whole world, a year of life and health and happiness. we have the opportunity as we're going out to this last week of Rosh Hashanah to try to change ourselves so that we can show God that, yes, we want to choose life. Now, there's a very interesting statement by Rabbi Abraham Twersky, Rabbi Shia Twersky. He writes in his book on the Chumash, when he says about this particular sentence, you shall choose life, he asks the same question. How is it possible that somebody won't choose life? And he says, and I quote from him, treating alcoholics has given me the answer to these questions. I regularly see people who do not choose life for themselves and also jeopardize the lives of their families. It is not that they willfully choose death. Their addiction so blinds them to reality, so distorts their judgment, that they are unable to see that they are choosing death or ruination for themselves and their loved ones. They simply cannot see reality. As I think about this sentence of the Torah, coupled with the comments I just gave to you, I can't help but think that we trying to deal with this pandemic, worldwide pandemic of COVID-19, really are not acting in a way to choose life. We are not acting in a way that shows that we're concerned about our fellow human beings. When you violate the requirements of the health authorities, which we know work, social distancing, this disease is spread by particles in the air, from which, by your breathing, by your speaking, staying far enough away from somebody, wearing masks as required, will help prevent this disease. Are you really looking at reality when you're walking around and not observing these guidelines? Or are you putting yourself, your family, and everybody else at risk? Is this what the Torah means to teach us in terms of choosing life? Is this how we deal with love of our fellow human being? By putting them in danger? I submit that these are thoughts that we should be thinking about as we enter Rosh Hashanah. You know, the day before Rosh Hashanah, coming a week from tomorrow, we have the opportunity to really rectify the entire year. In one day, we can make up for a year of bad decisions. As we go into Rosh Hashanah, we need to recognize that there are three, as I call it, 3 R's of tshuva, 3 R's of repentance as set forth by the Ramban. Because we want God to forgive us for what we've done, and we want to come out as a different person. Rosh Hashanah means we should be a different person as we go into Rosh Hashanah and as we come out of Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't do any good to just say, I'm sorry for something bad that I did, but not get rid of the basis that caused you to do it in the first place. So the Rambam talks about 3 things, which I've categorized as the 3 R's of tshuva, the 3 R's of repentance. And what are they? The first is to recognition. Recognize that you've done something wrong. The second R is resolve. I resolve not to do it again. Well, we all know that New Year's resolutions are often made and are often discarded within a couple of days. So resolving isn't enough. So the third of the 3 R's is to refrain. When you have the opportunity to do something again, stop from doing it. Don't do it. Refrain from doing it. Those are the 3 R's of tshuva. When you're refraining, when you learn to refrain, then you've really made a change internally. And that's what we need to do in Rosh Hashanah. I thank you all for listening on behalf of the webyeshiva.org, a place where you can do lots of interactive learning. I wish everybody a happy, healthy year, a year when we can finally be free of this pandemic and learn to love one another and be happy with one another. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.